pot, T-O-T. That's the holy grail. Top 3 would be potatoes, onion, tomatoes. Like those 3. I don't know what the order is, but it's those 3 basically. Potatoes, onion, tomatoes. The two of us didn't know anything about any of that. Right? We learned a little bit about how to do last mile and all that running kirana cart, but how do you actually build a brand, or how do you actually do supply chain? No idea. We hadn't even thought of the name yet. Like there was no name for this business yet. And we said we've just raised some money from Nexus to build this whole 10-minute quick commerce thing. Do you want to come on board? And he was like, are you guys crazy?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Are we all pumped? Super pumped? Zepto pumped?
Yeah.
Great. So I'll start with this, that, during the pandemic, a lot of habit changes have happened. And some of them, they've been temporary. Others have been just permanent. And one such permanent change that has been brought in is the way we've started using our mobile apps for ordering in food. Mm-hmm. So I am personally very excited that today we have none other than the co-founder of Zepto, which is today India's fastest growing internet company, not just in the food delivery space, but even otherwise. So we have the co-founder of Zepto, Mr. Kaivalya, here with us today.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm super excited.
So while I feel Kaivalya does not need an introduction, but for the sake of it, I will do it. So Kaivalya is a computer science dropout from Stanford University and a Y Combinator alum. And with a background in coding and a belief in the importance of going very deep into one's expertise to solve real-world problems, he co-founded Zepto, and I think it was formerly called Kirana Cart.
Yeah.
With his friend and college mate Adit, and I hope Adit is feeling better. He was supposed to be here with us, but
he's got his wisdom tooth removed.
So he's, I think, in a bit of pain right now as we speak, but hopefully he's recovering. So from Kirana Cart to Zepto, Kaivalya has been instrumental in building a product that's efficient and seamless. In his current role, he leads the tech operation at Zepto and is responsible for shaping the business strategy, right from the design to development of the app, to setting up of the system, building partnerships, enabling teams with an efficient infrastructure, and lots more. I think you also oversee Zepto's security systems, operational integrity, support system, and maintenance. Yeah. Under your leadership, Zepto has grown to add 1 lakh new users every single week, is what I've been told. And you're amongst the top 3 quick delivery companies today in the country, with a 65% month-on-month retention and 80-point NPS.
Yeah.
That is fabulous. So welcome, Kaivalya, to Masters Union, and we're so glad that you took out the time, and very excited for all the questions that we have lined up for you.
No, I'm very excited to be here. I think we were interacting with some of you guys earlier today, and this is a beautiful campus and a bunch of fantastic people here. So very excited.
Thanks, thank you. So I'll dive right into the questions, and as always, we'll leave plenty of time in the end. So keep your questions ready because I'm sure you have lots of them. So Kaivalya, I think first I would want to start with how, while Zepto is the company that brought both Adit and you, outsized fame, but this is not necessarily your first venture, even independently or together, right? I think you've started multiple businesses before this also. So would love to hear about that journey of other ventures and how they've performed and how they've led you to where you are.
Yeah, sure. So both Adit and I have been friends since we were about 7-8 years old or something. We went to the same school, and we've been friends for a while. Throughout school, we just worked on many random things. I'll give you a couple of examples. One of them was this carpooling app, right, for school commutes, because it was a fairly major pain point. That was one example. Did a couple of random Chrome extensions. I'd built at one point. I think this was just before our 10th grade. I had a 10th grade economics board exam or something like that. And at the time I was starting to get into podcasts, and I was reading my economics textbook, and I got a notification on my phone because some new podcasts had just come out, and I was just okay, wouldn't it be cool if I could listen to my textbook? And so that night sort of put together a super basic prototype for something where you could just take pictures of your textbook and then convert the image to text and then text to speech, right? The idea being that when you're cooking or in the gym or running or whatever, you can listen back to your textbook. And so like random things like that, right? I think the one that had the most success per se or scale was this carpooling one that we were able to launch at like a couple of, like I think like a dozen plus schools, and it had like a reasonable level of scale. For us at the time, we were very excited, obviously. It's not comparable to Zepto, but yeah, so stuff like that we used to do. Just whatever random problems we could get our hands on, we would just spend some time solving them.
So very interesting. And you mentioned about, you saw a problem and you jumped to solve it. So where did that muscle come from, and how did you and Adit do it together?
Yeah, that's a good question. Where the muscle came from? I don't know. I think fun. So both of our dads are engineers, I guess, and so I think from and I think I can speak for my dad at least, is that he always fostered like a little bit of curiosity. It's not a little bit, like a lot of curiosity, just by like asking me random questions, like just growing up, and just getting me to think about stuff. And so I guess partly from there, it's like, okay, why is this the way it is, or why is that the way it is? In terms of doing things together, I think both of us ended up being pretty entrepreneurial, which is weird because like neither of my parents are entrepreneurs. Like my dad's a engineer, my mom's a dentist. So and yeah, Adit's dad's a banker. Adit's mom runs a business though. But I don't know where it came from, but we just ended up being pretty entrepreneurial. I think for both of us, what was cool was that we were learning about, we're doing basic computer science in school and outside, learning how to code and all of that. But what was cool was that I think while we were going through school is when all of these on-demand apps came out. So like Uber, for example, right, really got big while we were in school. And so it was like, okay, you can press a button and then a cab shows up and you're like, what the hell is going on, right? And food delivery and all these other things. And so I think that is something that we were always amazed by. We're like, okay, we're learning how to code, but then there are people that are leveraging that same technology to make atoms move in the real world, right? I think so a lot of times what I've read, so a lot of people split startups or businesses into, at least technology startups, into atoms businesses or bits businesses. So like pure SaaS is like a bits business. You're just like bits and bytes, and that's what it is. And atoms businesses is like an Amazon or an Uber, where real things are moving in the world. And we were always attracted to atoms businesses, right? Which is that you can write some software and then things in the real world move. And so yeah, we were always attracted to that from a fairly young age, like 14, 15 maybe.
Right.
And so yeah, I don't know where it came from though. That's a good question.
And by the time you got to 19 or something, you just made sure everything is moving around. Like so many groceries getting moved around. So very, very interesting. And what also stands out is, like you said, that both you and Adit have been friends since almost I don't know, 12 more than a decade now. So how has that friendship or relationship grown from being friends to being business partners? How do you keep yourself accountable? How do you grow together? So just curious.
Question. Yeah, I think like one piece of advice is that in general, if you, I know from what I understood earlier, a lot of you are at some point want to start businesses, right? And how much you're going to be able to like trust, basically, how much you're going to be able to trust somebody is probably like the beyond technical competence or this or that. Like that is the, like trust is the quality to index on, right? Trust and integrity. Because with building any sort of business, the highs are always very, very high, but the lows are always very, very low, right? And if you have somebody that you've been friends with and known for a long time, you can be very transparent about that, right? About this is where you messed up, right? Or this is where I messed up, or this is where we both messed up, or this is where we've done really well, or whatever, right? But there is transparency, right? And we both know that we're both here to build this for the next several decades, and so it's like both of us take that long-term view whenever we're thinking about a particular problem or how to evaluate a situation. And so I would say trust is something that's just generally pretty the most important thing. And yeah, I think because we've been friends for that long, and because we also worked on a lot of these things, a lot of like random things together, we also understand how each other, like how we work, and like I said, because we take that long-term view, we're able to also identify areas where we can push each other to be better, right? And so yeah, I think, but that comes because I think we've just been friends for a while.
But both of you had a computer science background, so the skill set you guys see it to be overlapping, complementary?
No, pretty complementary. So I think, so between the two of us, I was always more technical, and Adit was always a better storyteller, right? So Adit was like a really good debater, so he used to like do competitive debate and all of that, and was really good at storytelling basically. Whereas I was always more technical. And so I think pretty complementary.
That's a good coincidence then. Great. And this question I think I'm asking on behalf of our students, because a lot of them are in that dilemma that, okay, I want to start up, but now suddenly there's a great company which I might want to go to. So how did you guys think about the opportunity cost? And how did you make that decision that, I don't want to wait for another 3-4 years to earn my Stanford degree. Instead, I'll just drop out and start this right away. So,
in my general advice would be, you should start, like all of you that are making that decision, just lean towards starting something, unless the company that trying to hire you is Zepto, in which case, please join. So this is an interesting one. Basically, for both of us, I think even while we were in school, we were pretty clear about what the end goal was. The end goal was that go do an undergrad, work at some startup for like 2-3 years, and then eventually start something, right? Raise capital, build a team, blah blah blah, scale it. At the age of whatever, 27, 28. What the position we ended up in, right, when we had to decide whether we wanted to drop out or not, which was we initially took a gap year for a year, and then after that gap year ended, we had to decide whether we want to go back or not. Within that gap year was roughly August 20 to August 21. September 21 was when they were like, you coming back or not? And by that point, within that gap year, we had started Kirana Cart, raised some money for that, went through Y Combinator, shut down Kirana Cart, raised some money for Zepto, launched Zepto, and by the time we had to decide this, we already signed our term sheet for our Series B, which was like a $50 million round, right? And so it's like at that point, you're okay, is there a significant amount of risk that this is going to shut down tomorrow? Not really, right? It's like, but this is the thought process was basically, this is what we wanted to do at 27, 28. We have the opportunity to do that now, right? And so, like, why not just prepone that? And so that's how we were thinking about it. Obviously, that's not how our parents were thinking about it. And so there was a little bit of that back and forth to convince them to see it the way we saw it. But that happened, and then that's how we always took that view that anyway we want to do this. We're able to do it like 6 years earlier than we had planned. So, why not?
Fantastic. I think that clarity that you had, that yes, at some point we wanted to do it, and it's just preponing. And I'm sure it was like an uphill battle convincing your parents at some point. But you had reasonable funds and data to back your ask. So great. Also now, Kaivalya, if we look at the competitive landscape, Zepto was definitely amongst one of the tail ends of the player who came in, but they just grabbed market share. So at the time when you were launching, and this is like a twofold question, at the time when you were launching, were you worried about the incumbents who at that time at least had much deeper pockets that you might have? And second, even if you would have raised the funds, etc., were you worried that they can just tweak their systems and sort of catch up? And why am I also asking this question is a lot of times students feel that, okay, I should not share my idea. I should shell, no, someone can copy my idea. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Sure. I'll come to the like a little bit of advice part on the last bit. But I think we didn't think about that. I mean, we thought about it, but we didn't think it would be an issue because for us personally, it would be like, the cook would come and say, like, "Bhaiya, aaj kya banana hai?" And we'd say, whatever's in the fridge. And then she'd open the fridge and there'd be nothing in the fridge. And we were like, okay, is there something that is solving this right now?
Right.
No. And so, sure, there are a lot of incumbents that are there and a lot of grocery delivery businesses that have been around for 10 years, but none of them are solving this problem that we once solved. And so, until that's done, there's still quite a lot of scope to do something in this space. And so so that was the thinking there. In terms of whether or not, this is the second part, which is whether we were concerned about whether they could make slight tweaks and just compete.
Right.
The general philosophy that, so we had this, and we spoke to a lot of people about this also. In general, something that happens with every organization as it scales is that it just becomes slow. And this is true for everybody. This is true for us also. Like 5 years out, we will not be as fast as we are today in terms of our execution. And so that was a bet that we were willing to take. If we launch and scale quickly, that the amount of time it will take for these guys to realize, the amount of time it will take for them to have 10 meetings and make a decision about what to do. And then the third thing is like actually then execute on that. By that point, we would have enough of a head start. And so that was also not really a concern. On the common, I don't know if I would call it a misconception or not again, but on the common thought that, I need to protect my idea. It's a very, natural instinct as an entrepreneur, but like 99% of, the outcome that you have is going to be execution, right? Like your idea is important, obviously. Like you need to have a large problem that you want to go after and all that, but it's like, it doesn't really matter if, 100 other people also know that you're working on something. Like let them work on it also, right? Because ultimately what's going to, end up determining whether you win or not, or whether you build a large business or not, is just how well you execute, right? And that's what we're seeing within this space as well, is that, and historically you'll also see this, right? E-commerce, right? In India, today large players are Amazon and Flipkart, but at one point you had like a Snapdeal, a shop-to-doorstep, and like 10 other players, right? And then over time that consolidated. Why? Because Amazon and Flipkart executed the best, right? Snapdeal and shop-to-doorstep and all these guys had a lot of capital also, right? And it wasn't about, just about capital. So yeah, it's I think all like 99% of building a business is execution, in my opinion. And so don't be worried about sharing your ideas and all that. I don't think it's that big of a problem.
And similarly for Urban Company, I think 10 other players were funded at the
like
time.
Every space.
Right.
Every space.
Fair. Interesting. So Kaivalya, talk to us about that initial inception that, Maid opened the fridge, there's nothing, and there are no players who are solving this, to actually coming to that 10-minute delivery. Like, why 10 minutes? Why not 15? Why not 5? Or like, what's that journey like?
Yeah. I'll answer the second question first because it's an interesting question.
Sure.
We had this debate for a bit, right? Whether it should be 10, whether it should be 15, or longer. So one thing we knew that it had to be within this ballpark, because with Kirana Cart, which was the prior business, there are median time was like 45 minutes. But what pushed us to get faster was that we saw that some customers, a very small segment, but some customers were getting their deliveries in 10-15 minutes because they lived very close, like 500 meters away from the Kirana stores that were delivering, basically. Sure. So by chance, they got their deliveries in 10-15 minutes. Those customers had by far the best NPS, the best retention, the best word of mouth, all of that. And so we're like, okay, people care about speed for sure, right? And so we're like, okay, that this matters. Now deciding 10 minutes or 15 minutes was just what we were trying to do was basically just, can we be faster than the next best alternative, which is me going downstairs myself and picking it up and coming back, right? That would typically take 10 minutes or longer, and so let's beat that, right? Because that's what we're competing with, right? At the end of the day. And so, I think, that's where 10 minutes came from. We're just like, we want to be faster than you going downstairs, getting in your lift and walking out. And so that's where the 10-minute thing came from. What was the first part? Sorry.
The first part was like, that journey of just figuring out from like, not having things to starting it.
I think one thing that we got pretty lucky with, this wasn't as conscious of a thought, but in hindsight is what ended up working, is that we realized pretty quickly that it's a very complicated business. It's like a very complex supply chain business, a complex retail business. Last mile is complex. There's like all these things are in their own respect very complicated. And the two of us didn't know anything about any of that. Right? We learned a little bit about how to do last mile and all that running kirana cart, but how do you actually build a brand, or how do you actually do supply chain? No idea. And so March, April of last year, we had raised our Series A to build Zepto. But it was just pretty much Azadit and I. We had one early hire that we had from kirana cart. And from that point onwards, we just said, let's hire a couple of people that are significantly smarter than us, that have done bits and pieces of this before, to come in and help build this out. Because there are two approaches that you can take, right? There's one approach which is that either you yourself try, fail, iterate, try again, fail, iterate, or you hire a couple of generalists, right? That try, fail, iterate. That's one approach. We were just like, we don't have the time to do that, right? And so rather than doing that learning curve ourselves, we said, let's hire some people who have gone through that learning curve before at their past organizations. And so we hired a bunch of people from like a Flipkart, Amazon, Revigo, DMart, this, that. People who have done bits and pieces of this before. People from Zomato and Swiggy for last mile. So that they've made the mistakes in the past, right? So they won't repeat those same mistakes. And that's what gave us a little bit of a head start, and allowed us to get a lot of things right the first time. So yeah, that was the approach that we took.
And interestingly, and this is something that, when I was hiring for my own startup, talent attraction, especially last year when it was like a party year, too much funding in the market, etc. So did you guys face some challenge there? And if you did, how did you overcome that?
Sure. So one thing I'll preface this with is that this is a fantastic storyteller, right? Like, you can't imagine. So our chief operating officer used to run ops for grocery at Flipkart, basically. Right? He was living a very comfortable life in Bangalore. And we got in touch with him through a headhunter, and we were like, hey, you just raised some money to do this. We hadn't even thought of the name yet. Like, there was no name for this business yet. And we said, we've just raised some money from Nexus to build this whole 10-minute quick commerce thing. Do you want to come on board? And he was like, are you guys crazy? Right? He's like, because we wanted him to fly to Bombay. Both of us were in Bombay. And so he's like, leave your family aside, come to Bombay and build this with us, right? And leave your comfortable lifestyle in living in Bangalore, working at Flipkart, and come and do this with us. And it took a long time, obviously. I think we had to convince his parents that this is a good move for his career.
So many parents involved.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. But eventually he came on board, right? But it was tough, right? I think, like most people would just not want to even have a conversation about it, because they were like, what are you talking about? Like, this can't even be possible, including my own mother. So like, my mom grew up in Bombay in Lokhandwala, which is like this part of Andheri. And there's like Lokhandwala Circle, and then you go into into the lane, and we were on the second cross lane or something. It might be like a kilometer or something like that. And I remember when I was telling her that, hey, we're doing this 10-minute thing. She was like, are you crazy? Like, that can't happen, because even if your warehouse is on Lokhandwala Circle, it'll take more than 10 minutes to reach our building. Right? And so that was a typical reaction also that most people had. So it was tough, no doubt about it. But at the same time, I think the people that were crazy enough to join at that stage, it was that craziness that we needed, right? To be able to build this as quickly as we did. So
absolutely,
ended up working out.
Very interesting, because I remember the first time I saw the Zepto ad where it's like delivery in 10 minutes. I literally laughed. I'm like, another faker sort of thing. And then one day my mom's like in the kitchen, and she ran out of some ingredient, and the driver had gone by the time she was cooking. And I was like, I'll go get it. She's like, no, my friend told me there's something like Zepto, tum download karo na.
Word of mouth is working well.
So I was like, Mummy, kuch nahi aane 10 minutes, I'll go and get it. But she insisted, we tried, and I was just blown away by the fact that it actually came less than 10 minutes.
That's most of our acquisition. It's like just that kind of word of mouth.
I'm sure. Very interesting. So Kaivalya, like, we see the deliveries happening in 10 minutes in most cases, etc. So tell us what goes behind this 10 minutes delivery. Like, what are those things that have helped build this 10 minutes delivery? How hard, easy, etc. it is?
Yeah. Where should I start? Sure. So I think one of the most important things to making this happen is something called network design, right? Which is basically deciding where to put which warehouse, right? So if today you want to launch in Udyog Vihar, where in Udyog Vihar should we put our dark store or a micro warehouse? Because that ultimately influences the distance to the customer, which is the longest stretch of the journey, right? When you, I'll break this down a bit further, but when you order, you put in your UPI pin or whatever, within like 60 seconds, at max 90 seconds, a bike is starting and someone's on their way, right? And so the majority of that 10 minutes is actually just the driving time. And so making sure the distance to the customer is short is where network design is super important, because you have to balance that, like balance the maintaining short distances part with also not opening too many warehouses, right? Because sure, like if I want to open one warehouse every 50 meters, everyone can do 10-minute delivery, but that's expensive, right? And not doesn't make a lot of sense. And so that balancing act is network design. So that's one important part to this. Then I'll just briefly touch on this 60-90 second dispatch thing, because that's ultimately, I think, where a lot of the innovation goes. So I'll break it down step by step. The first bit is just how you lay out the warehouse, right? And where to put which product. We briefly upstairs were talking about this, but planogramming, it's a common concept in retail, but basically, on which shelf should I put which product, right? And so if there's fast moving products, maybe I put them at the exit or this or that. Heavy products should go somewhere, light products should go somewhere else, so that eggs don't break in the bag and all of that concept. But also the more important part is fast moving being somewhere else, slow moving being somewhere else. So that, let's say if most orders have XYZ SKUs, there is like a shortcut that a packer could be taking, so they don't have to go through the whole warehouse. So that's the layout, the planogramming, deciding where to put which product. Then would be basically the software, which is all of our packers basically have a handheld device, which is basically like an Android phone with a barcode scanner attached to it. And Google Maps style, we sort of navigate them through the most optimal path. So we tell them, go here, take left, straight, go to this shelf, pick this up, scan it, put it in the bag. And that sort of allows them to do it in about a minute. And then in parallel, while all this is happening, we also assign a delivery partner. The delivery partner typically is waiting somewhere around the dark store anyway. They put on the helmet and they get the bag ready and walk up to the pickup point. So that happens in parallel. The packing is done. There's like a quick 5-10 second handshake. Rider gets onto the bike, drives to your house, and then hands them over to you. Like
wow. And I can think of like 100 use cases where maybe someone's just ordering the entire month's grocery.
Yeah.
And how do you handle that?
We have a 25 kilo weight limit.
Okay.
Because that's the most that one delivery partner can carry. But yeah, most of our orders are not the monthly grocery full stock up anyway. So yeah, that ends up working out.
Got it. And so talk to us about what is in a typical Zepto basket, and what's the average number of things, etc.
Average number of units is like between 5 and 7. Sort of varies. And our biggest category, so about maybe close to like 50% of our business, roundabout, is a mix of fruits and vegetables, bakery, dairy, and stuff like that, right? Fresh stuff, basically. Low shelf life. Things that are less than a week of shelf life, typically. Right? That is like half our business, right? Those couple of categories. And then within the other half, it's sort of the next major one would be like your cooking essentials. Right? Actually, I want people to guess this, right? What do you think the top 3 most, like the fastest selling or most selling products are by units, like in terms of number of units? Like give me like an actual product. Bananas, bread, milk.
Coriander.
Okay. So it's cigarettes. Interesting. You're overestimating the number of smokers. There's a lot more housewives in this country than smokers.
True.
The top 3 would be potatoes, onion, tomatoes. Like those 3. I don't know what the order is, but it's those 3 basically. Potatoes, onion, tomatoes. Pot, P-O-T. That's the holy grail, right? Like that. There's a significant Pareto distribution in grocery, and P-O-T is like massive. And you can imagine, right? That's like a daily consumption thing. And so, but then like milk and bread and all are there also, obviously. But yeah, so 50% is perishable stuff. Then is like cooking essentials, which is like dal, atta, rice, masala, stuff like that. Then we have all the indulgence categories, which is your everything from your cold drinks, ice cream, munchies, biscuits, cigarettes, all of that. And then is like your home and personal care. So, washing powder or toothpaste or whatever. So that's the general sequence. But we're adding a lot more categories now. And so this mix is starting to get shaken up a little bit. So Zepto Cafe is something we did it's currently in Bombay only. Hopefully soon in Gurgaon also, which is like chai, coffee, sandwiches, samosas, stuff like that. And the areas that we've launched that in, that's like doing really well. Like 10% of all orders in those neighborhoods have some chai, coffee or something like that. Right? It's like a very natural add-on to your regular groceries. And so, trying stuff out with makeup right now. So there's a whole bunch of new categories now that we're playing with. So that mix is getting shaken up a bit. But yeah, this is like largely what it looks like.
I can totally imagine, like, whenever the guest at my place, my mom's like, go get some samosas or like, get some sort of snacks for them. So totally. Very interesting. So I'll switch gears a little bit here and, would love to just talk about, because a lot of our students are also looking at becoming founders. So talk to us about your YC experience and how that has not helped you, etc. What has been your experience like?
Yeah, no, I would recommend YC to anybody. Right? Like pretty much anybody. I think that, it added a lot of legitimacy to what we were doing, right? Because earlier it was like, okay, whatever, if things don't work out, we can always go back to college and all that. But once you got into YC, it was like things were real, because now someone had just given us $125,000 to build this business, right? And so that, coupled with the intensity and rigor of the program, it was like 12 weeks. Every week, you're interacting with a bunch of crazy people. So one is like your group partners who are there every week. So one of our group partners was this guy called Tim Brady. He was the first employee at Yahoo, chief product officer there. Was there through the .com crash, like 99, 2000, all of that, right? Literally saw Yahoo go up, down, and then start, making their way back up. He was there for about like 15 years. And so you're meeting with this guy once a week, and he's giving you whatever advice you need, helping you, with your questions, and really just helping you build your business. Like people like that every week. And then there were also weekly sessions where you had external founders. Some of them were YC companies, right? Dropbox or Stripe or whatever, who were coming in and you would just AMA, right? Ask me anything and giving you their experience. And so it was like fantastic because access to, that knowledge is great. But more importantly than that, I think the accountability was crazy, because you're in a group with like 5-6 people, 5-6 other companies, and within your like little batch. And so Tim is like, every week there's a call with all these companies and Tim, and they're like, okay, what did you get done last week and what are you planning on getting done next week? Right? And then you come back a week later and it's like, okay, did you actually do that or not? Right? And so the sense of accountability is there, and it's really accelerates stuff, because it's like every week you have to make some progress, because I don't know, it's a like side social thing where you don't want to like the other companies in your group to be, get ahead and stuff like that. So it's like a side social thing that way, but it really works, because in those 12 weeks, the amount of progress that every single company makes is dramatic. Like a lot of companies make like 2 pivots, 3 pivots, and still end up getting to like some reasonable level of scale before the end of the batch. And the final reason I would recommend YC is because it makes fundraising very easy, relatively, because you have at the end demo day, which is like a 1-minute pitch to like 1,000+ investors, and then it's like a Tinder type thing where they like you or they don't like you. And if they like you, then there's like an email that automatically gets sent connecting the two of you, and then you can go and take things forward, right? And so yeah, I think it was fantastic. It brought a lot of legitimacy into what we're doing. We learned a lot. Most of our mistakes we made were doing YC, but it just shortened the iteration time, and we would have done things maybe the same way, but compressed like a year or two's worth of company building into like 3 months. And so that's why I would recommend it.
Fantastic. And actually, my next question was going to be around fundraising, especially so early on. But so I would say that YC is one of the reasons why it helped. Or
so
and
yes,
especially
initially,
this crowded market, and then young founders and very late into the market, like everything against you in some way, I feel.
So so during YC we raised like a little bit of capital, but that was for Kirana Cart, which was like a different business, more of a marketplace. And by the end of our YC batch, which was March of last year, March 2021, we were pretty clear that that business was not going to work and we had to shut it down and do something else. And we had this idea for Zepto basically. We hadn't thought of a name or how we would do it or anything, but we had the idea. With the older business, Kirana Cart, we had scaled it. So we'd grown like 10x in like 4-5 weeks. And so it was scaling, but the customer experience wasn't great. It wasn't clear how we'd make money. And so we didn't really want to carry that on further. We met someone at that point just before demo day, we met someone called Subir, who is the founder of Nexus, basically. And Nexus Venture Partners, one of like India's oldest VC funds. He was like one of the first wave of Indian tech entrepreneurs back in the day. Built eBay for India, Bazi.com, sold that to eBay, ran eBay's India business for a bit, and then left to start Nexus. They've invested in like everybody, like Snapdeal, Housing, like all those guys, right? Back in the day, and Unacademy and newer people now also. And so we were talking to him, and he was pretty impressed, I think, with the execution that we had done in the last like 4-5 weeks, scaling Kirana Cart. But B, he was also very excited. So he was like, okay, maybe these guys can actually build something, right? But B, he was like even more excited about what Zepto, again, there was no name at the time, but what quick commerce and 10-minute delivery could become in India. And so he was like willing to make a bet. So Nexus led our Series A. That was our Series A, basically. Nexus invested like $6.5 million or something into us, which was basically like just an idea at that point, sort of, right? It was like pre-product for Zepto. But we had, again, proven out like some level of execution with Kirana Cart, but this was like a pretty fresh pivot, right? And so then Nexus, so Suvir and Nexus invested that just because it was a pretty big bet. I think it was like their largest Series A that they had done, at least their largest check that they put into any Series A. And so they took that, Suvir took that bet. YC was a part of that, but of the reason why he had that conviction. But yeah, so started there, then we started hiring and so on. I think the way we look at it is sort of, you have to build with fundraising and most things, right? Hiring also. You have to build it's like a ladder of credibility. Right? It's like you start with zero, right? You have to do something to get some credibility. And so for us, we tried doing some stuff before, and then that got us into YC. So okay, now we're in YC, and so that allowed us to raise a couple $100,000 of angel investor money. Like, okay, cool. Then we use that money to execute a little bit. That got us into the door with Suvir. And so Suvir was like, okay, cool. You guys looks like you guys know how to do some basic level of execution. And so here, take my money and let's build this thing together. And so he invested, and then that made it hiring easier because now we're talking to this guy from Flipkart, and we're like, if we had not done anything, it'd be very difficult to hire.
Of course,
obviously. But because we had gone through YC and then we had ran Kirana Cart for a bit, we had raised the Series A. It's just more and more credibility, and then you hire this guy. Now hiring the next 10 people is easier because like, oh look, this guy from Flipkart has joined us, right? And so bit by bit, it's like credibility that you're building. Eventually though, by like the Series B, C, D stage and all that, it just became a lot more about the business, right? It's like, how well is the business doing? Because at that point, it's like you have scale, and so it's like all about how quickly the business is growing, what is the capital efficiency, how quickly are your dark stores turning profitable? All of that stuff becomes a lot more important, right? Then it becomes flipped, rather than like having to build this credibility. Then it just becomes, how well can you execute, right? And so for us, up till about Series A, it was like building this ladder of credibility. Series A onwards, it was just how well can you execute, and that's what determines whether you like how much you raise, whether you raise or further rounds of capital.
Very, very helpful. Very, very helpful, Kaivalya. And also this might be slightly premature for the audience, but just very keen to hear, like, were there any red flags or green flags or like checkpoints that you were keeping for your investors and board members? That who do we bring in, who do we not bring in?
Sure.
And how do you leverage these investor and board relationships as you grow?
Yeah. I think we've been very, very fortunate, with the board that we have. And yeah, I think this is some advice that we got from YC very early on, which again, they said was like, you're not going to care about this now because this is still some time away. But, Matt, like one of our partners, Surbi, who had run like this health tech company for a bit, she was like, the hardest part of my job by the end of it was not actually running the business, but it was just managing my board.
Yes.
Right? And so they gave us a lot of advice, about being like triple sure that these are the right people and all that. And so with Suvir, so there are three external sort of folks on our board. With Suvir, it was like we just met him a couple of times in person in Bombay, and it was just very clear that he was super excited about this. And one thing that we do every time we raise money is reference checks, right? It's like you do reference checks while hiring. It's like, you're going to be working with this person. He's going to be on your board for like 10 years. You better do a reference check before you bring them on board. And so other founders that they've invested in, other boards that they're on, reference checks just to see what sort of board member they'll be. And so that's something we do with everybody. In general, I think our board is largely hands-off. It's not like, they're not very interested in running the day-to-day of the business. They're like, this is your business. Do it how you want to do it. We're here in case you need anything. So if, we're stuck somewhere, or, we need to get introduced to somebody, or, we have a particular hiring problem that we want to solve, right? Then they're like, my network is open. You use us however you see fit. But in general, they're pretty, they don't really like the horror stories that you hear about, an Uber or an Apple or a WeWork or whatever. And none of that. So we've been very fortunate, very, very fortunate with that. In fact, YC, so something interesting. So YC is on our board because they pretty much led our Series C and our Series D, because they also have a growth fund. It's called YC Continuity. So they have the program that they run twice a year, which is the standard thing with the batch, 125K, blah, blah, blah. They also, for companies that do well, they invest Series B onwards also, right, from their batch. And so, we went through YC from January to March of last year. December of last year is when we raised our Series C, which was a $100 million round that was led by YC Continuity. So it was like within the scope of that 12 months, it was like a full circle moment. And YC is fantastic, right? Like, they're really helpful. Really helpful to people to have around. And so, I think we've been pretty fortunate with our board. But it is very premature for like most of you, but just in the back of your mind, just keep that there. Right? It's like picking and choosing your board members is equally important, to maybe like picking and choosing your co-founders or your early hires. It's like treat it with that same level of gravity.
Right, like money comes with a lot of colors of its own.
Sure, yeah.
Great. So Kaivalya and I don't get to ask this from a lot of founders, but you are also the chief technology officer here at Zepto.
Yeah.
So talk to us about that journey of, how you guys decided when to build what, how do you prioritize that, what goes in the sprint, and just talk to us, like this is like a broad question, but because a lot of times, MBA folk might feel that, okay, I don't have the tech skills and might not know how to prioritize it. So just talk to us about that journey.
Sure. Early on, we didn't have any product managers. It was literally just like, we also didn't have a lot of engineers because last year was impossible to hire. And so, for the first 6 months of the business, we had like 10 engineers, 15 engineers. And that's literally like until now. So until like January of this year, we had like 10 or 15 engineers and no PMs. And so initially it was all just like pre-launch. It was literally it was an MVP, right? It was like, what is the bare minimum we need? Okay, you need to be able to search for products, you need to be able to browse for products, you need to be able to add them to your cart, and you need to be able to pay. And like some sense of, how long it's going to take would be good, right? And so that's what we built. And similarly on the packer side and the delivery driver side, it was like, okay, what do we need to do? Okay, the packer should be able to see, what product he has to pick up next. We knew the speed was going to be important, and so all of that routing stuff about the most optimal path and all that, rider allocation, there we invested even pre-launch because the whole premise was speed, right? And so, but it was generally at that point the bare minimum, right? It's like whatever we need to just so that we're able to launch is what we're going to build. Because until launch, we had like literally me plus 3 or 4 people in the engineering team, right? And so that was that. And since then, obviously the team has grown and all that. We now have product managers, and now it's split into various verticals. So you have certain teams or pods that are focused on customer-facing problems, like how can I make the buying experience easier? How can I make search better? How can I personalize XYZ parts of the experience? You have certain last-mile teams that just how can I make allocation better, or how can I gamify the payout experience for riders so that they're more engaged? And then supply chain is primarily about efficiency, but now a lot of cool work happening on the farmer side, like fruits and vegetables tech. agri-tech and some of that there. Within that, there are like 1,000, principles of product management about how to prioritize. You have like, okay, RICE, which is like reach, impact, confidence, effort, blah, 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 and you multiply them, make a score. We don't do a lot of that, honestly. It's generally, we try to come up with some basic plan for a quarter. So right now, the planning and this has started happening now. Like before this, we didn't even make quarterly plans, but now we're at a stage where it's quarterly planning is probably pretty important. And so we make a basic roadmap. Each team does. So there'll be like 10 roadmaps that are there for like JFM, Jan, Feb, March, which is based on, again, which engineers are going to be working on what and how complex each of these things are and how long they're going to take, and some estimation of what impact they'll bring. We try to keep some buffer for like moonshots or things that are lower in confidence, but if they work, could be massive, right? Like for those of you that were there upstairs, like the Farmville example I gave with like the mango tree or whatever, right? So we keep some room for that as well and come up with a roadmap. Now, we're not at a stage where, that roadmap gets exactly executed because the nature of our business is such that every day something new is happening, right? And so, there's a lot of dynamism. And when we go back at the end of the quarter and reflect on, did we actually end up doing those things? There's a lot of change, right? But that's fine because every time something new comes up, we make that decision of like, okay, sure, this is new. We didn't originally plan for it, but it seems like it could be a lot more impactful than what we planned for. And so let's swap them out, right? And so all that happens, right? That's day in the life of a product manager. But yeah, I hope that answers that question.
That's super helpful. And also just talk a little bit about the ZEPTO'S tech infrastructure per se, because, as you scale, the infrastructure not breaking in itself is very critical. So how do you scale your infrastructure with the scale?
Yeah, no, good question. Step one is just like hiring really talented engineers. That's always good. And so I think that's one thing that we've been able to do. The other thing is, as a philosophy, you're always going to, every time you're going to build something, there'll always be like 5 different ways of building it, right? There's one which is like a really hacky solution that you could do in 2 days, but it also would like in a week from now break because it just like is not built to last. And then the other end of the spectrum would be like, I can spend 6 months building this and it's like the perfect thing and it'll last forever, right? Or last for like 10 years. No matter what scale you throw it, it'll last. And then there's like a bunch of solutions somewhere in the middle, right? In general, right? And so this question is actually just about where you put yourself on that spectrum. For the agility that we want to maintain, that end of the spectrum where we take 6 months to build something is just not in the question. And so it's a common term thrown out of tech debt, right? Which is like, how much tech debt are you okay with within your system? Because everything has a shelf life, right? And in my opinion, as long as you're conscious about the tech debt, that when you're deciding you're building something a certain way, that I'm picking this solution, it'll take us 2 weeks to build it. A year from now, though, we're going to have to come back and revisit this because it will not scale for that long, right? As long as you're taking that call consciously and you're like, okay, I'm okay with that because I need to balance agility. I can't spend 6 months building something, right? Because that's just not the time frame with which we are building stuff. And so that's as long as it's conscious and that, and now we're in that stage where we made those calls a year ago and now it's like time where we're going back and rebuilding some of those things. So yeah, I think it's a combination of those two things, being conscious with tech debt and also just having really talented engineers.
On the first part where you said like hiring really talented engineers, someone who's not a technology person or like, who does not come from tech background, what are ways or what are questions that one should ask to be able to identify? Because, within tech, the engineer's ability, like I'm also an engineer, but I'm not like someone who can do that.
No, so when I say talented engineers, so I'm not talking about technical competence purely, right? I mean, there are like a couple of things that are significantly more important than technical competence. In fact, we've let a lot of, like during our interviewing process, let a lot of really talented, from like a technical perspective, engineers go because they lacked in some of these things. And the primary one is just, so 2 that are important. One is curiosity and the other is ownership. Ownership is super important because it's like, we're not a MNC where somebody's going to tell you that this is what you have to do, and this is step 1, step 2, step 3 of how to do it, right? It's largely you get thrown in the deep end and you have to figure things out, right? And you know, a lot of people step up though, and a lot of people say, you know, okay, just keep throwing problems at me and I'll keep solving them. And those are people that, you know, if there's an issue at like 11:30 at night, even before I'm aware of it, they'll be on a call fixing it and stuff like that, right? They have that sense of ownership, right, over the tech that they're building and the problems that they're solving, more importantly than the tech, right? Engineers who are like problem first, you know, tell me a problem and I'll figure out how to solve it, right? Who go deep into understanding the business, right? Like our last mile engineers have all been on the ground and done deliveries, right? And you know, as delivery drivers, to understand their pain points so that they're able to build software for them, right? Similarly, our supply chain engineering team, once every couple of months, spends time in our warehouses, right? Packs orders, does all of that themselves, so that they're able to, again, empathize with the user, but also understand, you know, a lot of low-hanging fruit comes up there. They're like, oh, this is like a minor thing, but I could fix it so quickly, and so then they do it. And so those types of traits, right? People who are just willing to actually understand the business and go deep into the problems that they're solving, rather than saying that, you know, no, my engineering manager will tell me I need to do X, Y, Z, and this is how I'm going to do it, and I restrict myself to just that. Like that's the skill that we try to index on. How to hire for that is tough, honestly. It's very difficult to be able to tell that in an interview. I think a lot of one way of being able to do that is when you go through their resume and they've worked on a certain number of projects at their past organizations, trying to just double click into, okay, why did you do this, right? And like, okay, you did this, what happened as a result of that? And an understanding, like typically questions you would ask a PM, ask your engineers those questions, right? In my mind, product and engineering, there's often like I don't really like the way that product and engineering is run at most places, where there's like a very hard divide, which is like product is like just like a interface between the business and engineering. It's like really weird. I'm not a big fan of the way that happens. Like, and a lot of engineers, a lot of companies just like scared to talk to people from marketing. Like I don't get it. But that's, for the longest time, we didn't have any PMs. And so it was just like engineers and like folks from our respective business units that were just figure things out together. Right? Like someone from our finance team, our CFO would call up the engineers and say, hey, look, we need to figure out X, Y, Z thing to do our GST return in time. And they do it. Right? So that's the other thing, I think, is like, is this person just going to be like, you know, afraid to interact with folks in the business and understand business problems? Because ultimately, engineering, product, whatever you want to call it, is like problem solving. Like that's what it is. Like different ways of doing it, but it's just that, right? And so, these are the things I think matter a lot more than technical competence, right? I think, in fact, we would over-index on this, even more so than technical competence.
That's very insightful, because ownership and hustle and, you know, just actually being able to figure things out, and like you said, that kind of interaction between the engineers and the business team, so that you're actually working on that problem together. So that sounds like a pretty exciting culture to work in. So over to the last leg of the fireside, and then we'll open up for student questions, is that what are some white spaces that you might have identified as you're looking forward to grow Zepto? And you've covered this journey so fast now. I think the expectation of everyone from Zepto, what they'll do in the next 1-2 years, like growing.
Let me think about what I can say without tipping the competition off. No, I think, you know, what seems to be pretty exciting for the foreseeable future is just, so growth-wise, right? There are like two different types of growth. One is like very traditional, which is launch more dark stores and more neighborhoods, more cities, more countries, blah, blah, blah. Right? So that'll happen, right? Today we're in 10, 11 cities. Over time, that number is going to keep increasing. The second type of growth is what is actually a lot cooler, which is category expansion, right? So I talked about Zepto Cafe, makeup, going deep into meat as a category, or, you know, at some point OTC pharmacy, and in the States where alcohol is allowed alcohol, and you know, all these other categories. I think that's what the foreseeable future will look like. And I think, you know, quick commerce today is very nascent stages. It's been a year since this industry has been around. And so right now everyone's just thinking about, okay, what are the 10-minute use cases? Right? Which there are many, don't get me wrong. Like we started like in this last monsoon in Bombay, Bangalore, and these places, we were selling umbrellas, right? It was a hit. It's like nothing to do with grocery, but
Right.
it's what people need, right? And so the foreseeable future will just be like the next year or two will just be, okay, we've built. So I'll answer it slightly differently actually. I'll take a step back. A lot of people think that what we built is a grocery business, right? I don't think so. I think what we built is a super efficient logistics and delivery network. What we deliver is secondary, right? Like grocery is a great market, don't get me wrong, but it's not limited to that. And so now it's just a question of, can we work backwards from the customer basket and say, boss, aapko kya chahiye? And whatever that is, that's what we deliver, right? And so, yeah, just getting into more and more categories, more and more use cases, I think is what's next for the next like couple of years, and just being able to capture more and more wallet share from the same set of customers, right? One is obviously you can get more customers, but then once you have a customer on the platform, how do you get them to spend more, right? And this is one way of doing that.
Fantastic. This is very insightful. So I'll open it up for student questions. So if anyone wants to ask anything, they can raise their hand.
Right. One is, yes, you're absolutely right. We had no experience doing this. So we hired someone fantastic from Swiggy who had done it before, right? To build this for us. Because, yeah, he made gone through the learning curve himself. Initially, yes, because there was this phase, actually it goes up and down, right? It's like, it's an interesting one because initially, no, because initially when we were launching our first dark store, we just needed 10 guys. And so it was like, we hired like someone from Zomato and he just knew 10 riders and he just convinced them to join. And so initially, no. As we were launching our first 4 or 5 dark stores, it was okay. Like when you don't need that many. But then we went through this phase last year where we launched our first dark store in July. By the end of August, and we just spent some time perfecting it there. We launched another 3 or 4 in the month of August. And so at the end of August, we have 5 dark stores in Bombay, right? From September 1st until December 31st, 4 months, right? We went from those 5 dark stores to about 77. And we were in like 6 or 7 cities, right? So in that phase, yes, right? It was a challenge. But again, I think the team was able to, through various things, we built a bunch of city teams that were a little bit decentralized that went on the ground and onboarded riders and all that. And so it was okay. Then what happened is at some point earlier this year, I think March, April, around that time, there was this phase where there was like a shortage across the industry, right? Where everybody's service levels had taken a toss, like gone for a toss, like Zomato, Swiggy, us, everybody. I don't know why. Like a lot of delivery partners migrated back to their hometowns for like temporarily and then came back. But there was like a month or two in between where it was like a big challenge. Today it's okay. So today I'll explain why it's actually easier than ever is because one thing that happens within our business is that, let's say today we have a dark store in Udyog Vihar. Okay? Let's say that dark store has a capacity of X orders a day. Now, just before that, let's say 6 months before it hits X, we'd open a second dark store in Udyog Vihar and split the geo into 2, right? Now, as a result of that, the distance per deliveries come down, right? And so, that obviously helps us get faster and all that. But as we have shorter and shorter distances, we can increase the penetration of our cycles, e-cycles, e-bikes, and all of that, right? Because we have them, and it's pretty good contribution already. But we can't do like a 3-kilometer delivery on a cycle, right? Or a 2-kilometer delivery on a cycle. And so they're restricted to like, I think only deliveries below 1.2 kilometers or so, bicycles. But as we're doing more and more of these, and the general average distance per delivery is coming down, we're increasing our bicycle penetration. Now, bicycles are a lot easier, right? Because the talent pool is much wider, right? And so, that's the first one. What's your second question?
Did you follow hybrid payment?
Yeah. So we experimented with both, right? Like pure. Actually, I don't think we've ever experimented with pure variable. We've experimented with pure fixed and like a fixed plus variable, which is like there is a set amount per order, and then like there's like a weekly, monthly incentive if you do a certain. If you complete your if you log in at the times that you're supposed to log in at, which is like a slot that you select, if you actually come for that slot, and then if you do, there's like some order criteria or something. It's like fairly similar to what Zomato and Swiggy used to do. I know that like everybody keeps experimenting with different structures, but today it's like a fixed plus variable. One thing that we're able to do, because we actually have a central place where our delivery partners originate from when they're doing deliveries, which are our dark stores, which is different to like a food delivery marketplace, because there you can get onboarded by yourself and then you're you're all over the place, right? You're not in one place. Like you could be roaming all over a city throughout the day. We don't have that, right? As soon as the delivery is done, they come back to a Zepto dark store. What that lets us do is we actually have a lot more control over that training and onboarding process. And so at the time before they're able to do their first delivery, when they're getting their helmet and their t-shirts and their bag and all that, at that point there's like a 1 or 2 day delivery training program that happens, right? It includes obviously the basics of how to use the app and all that, but also basic principles of road safety and all that as well. And we keep doing refreshers for them. And now what we started doing in the last year is we actually partner a lot with local sort of police stations, right, and get folks from the police to come in to do training on like things like road safety and all that. And so there's like a constant retraining that happens. And at the same time, what we're now starting to work on is more L&D stuff, which is like, how can we get some of our delivery partners to now start going through their career much faster? Let's say today you're a delivery partner. Tomorrow you're like, how can we get you to a place where you're managing a fleet of delivery partners? And eventually, and keep growing through the organization. So now we started to work on some of those things as well. Yeah. So glad you asked this. There are a lot of people think, like, if I was to ask you what matters to a delivery partner, what determines which company they'll work for, the assumption that a lot of you might have is that it's how much they get paid, right? It's like, if Zomato is paying me X rupees more, I'll switch. Or if Swiggy is paying me X rupees more, I'll switch. Or if Zepto is paying me X rupees more, I'll switch. That's not the case, right? This was like a very common misconception, but it's not the case, because what actually matters infinitely more actually is how easy you make their lives. So for example, one thing that in general delivery partners don't like is long distance deliveries. And if you're on a food, we've seen this, and so Nexus had invested in this company called Roadrunner, which was acquired by Zomato. Right? The guy's name is Mohit. He now runs Ultrahuman, which is the health tech company. But he was the chief operating officer at Zomato for a while. And so when we were starting out, he was helping us out, understand last mile and all that. And so this was an insight that came from him, which was that, delivery partners might even churn from Zomato and go and leave and go to Swiggy, even if Swiggy is paying them less, if they do back-to-back, 10-kilometer orders, because they just don't, it's not good, right? They don't enjoy doing that. And so that's one thing that matters. So across the board, right, we're able to actually make their lives a lot easier in many respects. One is this long distance thing, right? Our average distance is like 1.5, 1.6 kilometers. Between orders, they have a place where they can sit, right? It's like basic things. Like they have a sheltered place where they can sit and charge their phone and use the bathroom, right? We do basic food, water, snacks, and stuff like that, at different parts of the day. These are things that are impossible for a marketplace to do. Like tomorrow, if it starts raining, right? You're a food delivery driver. Where do you go? Right? Most of the restaurants will not let you go and sit inside and then wait for the rain to finish. But because these dark stores are, we manage the, how these riders are, where they're able to sit and all that, the bathrooms they're able to use. We have control over those things, right? And so, yeah, these things, which are perhaps basic to like you or me, actually are significantly more important to a delivery partner than what they make, right, or how much money they make. And so, yes, in general, so the question was on retention, but as a result of all of this, our rider retention is pretty considerably higher than that of a food delivery marketplace.
Go ahead, Yukta. I think you can just speak up. I think the mic transferring.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sure. Okay. Sure. So just to re-clarify that was September to December when we went from 5 to 77. And that was also not all in one city. That was also a couple more cities. So the first 5 that we did were in Bombay. But then in that journey from 5 to 77, we also launched Delhi, Gurgaon, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Chennai, and all that. And so that happened over the course of 3-4 months. In terms of deciding, so now our real estate function within the team is actually pretty evolved, where once, let's say, our network design team has identified that, okay, in Udyog Vihar, we need to get a dark, like we should launch a dark store here, then it is relatively quick for our partners to find, a dark store there and rent it. Like it happens in like a couple of weeks. We'll evaluate a few options, negotiate the rent, and like the partners do all that. And yeah, we're able to find real estate pretty quickly now. I think, yeah, it's so actually, yeah, finding the real estate is not that much of a challenge. It's like we typically have a plan of a certain number of dark stores that we might want to launch in a particular month, and so and in which neighborhoods, in which cities, and then in advance of that, like a month before we're supposed to launch them, we start, we try to find real estate. We already have like a lot of like a rolling contract almost with all of the companies that make fridges or shelves or racks and all that, and so that's very easy to supply. And so the actual setup, once you move in to a space and getting it up and running, is very quick. That's like in a week you can get everything set up, and then it takes a couple of days to get stock onto the shelves. So net full process is like about a month, right? A couple of weeks of finding real estate, 1 week of installing all of this stuff, and about 3-4 days of getting stock built up on the shelves. So about a month is what it typically takes. So this is really, I'm really glad you brought this point up, right? Every time there's this constant rider safety conversation and debate that goes on, right? And the instant thing that people jump to is that it just makes sense for companies to push their riders to drive really fast, right, and drive on the wrong side of the road. What they don't realize is that like how counterintuitive that is, because like today, if for example you're driving and you in your car and you see a Zepto rider that doesn't have a helmet, or a Zepto rider that's driving the wrong side of the road or speeding, right, your perception of the Zepto brand is taking a hit, right, and so it is not in like anyone's best interest for that to happen, right, and so like that's one part of this. Anyway, unrelated to the question you asked, but yeah, so point is, it is in our best interest that our riders, our delivery partners, are safe. They behave, really well, and are courteous, and all of that stuff. The reason we've been able to do a pretty good job of it so far is because all of these delivery partners start off in a centralized place, right? Like 20 times a day, they go and come back to a centralized place, right, with a dark store. That is not the case for a Rapido or an Ola or any of these businesses which are purely decentralized, right? Because we have that, we actually have a little bit more control over the training, the quality of the people that we end up hiring also, right? In terms of like we interview them, right? Like there's like an interview that goes on with the rider. That's impossible to do if you are running a fully decentralized marketplace or whatever, right? But because we have some level of centralization that's there, we're able to do some of these things, right? We're able to do much tighter quality control, right? I remember somebody asking me, I think from Swiggy or Zomato, like, how do you guys make sure that your riders are actually wearing their t-shirts? Because it's a big problem for us, right? It's like things like we're able to do that because it's like centralized, right? We 20 times a day, this rider is, whatever, 10 times a day, 15 times a day, how many ever times a day, this rider is going and coming back from this same place, right? And so if you want to control any part of that last mile experience, it's much easier to do, right? Because we're interacting with the rider, like us as a business, as a company, our people from our team are interacting with this rider like face to face a lot more often, right? And so if we want to influence behavior in a certain way, or like train them on something, right, it's very easy, right? It's not as easy if you have like 1 lakh or 2 lakh Ola cabs that are spread out all over the country, right? Getting that type of penetration, even with training, quality of training, right? How do you actually make sure that when you're training somebody, they've absorbed it and actually understood what you're trying to do, right? If you get them to just watch a video, which is how the majority of these decentralized companies do it, how do you know whether they've actually internalized it or they just left it on the side? Right? When we're training people, we can actually make sure that they've understood what we're trying to train them on. And so there's like all of that boils down to one thing though, boils down to the model being a lot more centralized. A couple of generalizations there that I disagree with a little bit. So One is that I actually disagree with this axis, that it's about time and like the faster you get, the more expensive it becomes. This is a very common thought, but it's not true, right? The faster we deliver, the cheaper it becomes for us, right? I'll just give you a very basic example. Let's say that today, I'll take food delivery as an example because it's easy and everyone understands it. Let's say today, I'm a Zomato delivery partner. It takes me an average of 40 minutes from start to finish to do a delivery and wait for the next one to be assigned. So 40 minutes per delivery. That means I do 1.5 deliveries in an hour, right? Let's say that today I'm getting paid 100 rupees for that hour of my time, for example, right? Just like a random number. With Zepto, because our delivery time is much faster, let's say it's 10 minutes, you can go and come back, much more frequently, and you're able to do 2 deliveries an hour, 2 plus, right? 2.5 deliveries an hour, whatever, right? But if, let's say, for the sake of argument, that we're also paying them 100 rupees an hour for that hour of their time, because they're able to do a lot more deliveries in that same hour, the cost per delivery is lower, right? And the faster you become in terms of the shorter the distances get and the faster the delivery times become, the more orders a rider is able to do in an hour, right? And so your last mile cost keeps coming down. Right? Today, if we wanted to start delivering in like 15 minutes and do, or 20 minutes or 30 minutes and do longer distances, like that would be less profitable for us, right? It's like very counterintuitive, I guess, but that's there, right? So that's just one thing. Coming to your actual question, right, which was on differentiation. I think there are 4 things actually that customers care about. If you had to ask me, 5 years out, what will define whether a Zepto customer today is still a Zepto customer then? Right? There are 4 things. One, which is an intuitive one, is speed, right? Convenience. Like, can you build trust that this is the fastest possible way to get what I want to get? It's even faster than other apps. It's faster than me going myself. It's the fastest possible thing, right? The second thing, which people discount often but is more important than speed, is assortment and availability, right? Which is, I don't care if you're delivering in 5 minutes or 60 minutes or 30 minutes or 10 minutes. If I want tomatoes and you don't have tomatoes, who cares, right? Doesn't matter. I'm dropping off. And so availability is important. An extension of this is widening the assortment, newer categories, Zepto Cafe or makeup or whatever, pharmacy, blah, 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 right? Which is that, are you able to fulfill my need or not, right? Because if you're not able to fulfill my need, then the delivery fee and the ETAs don't matter, right? This is actually the starting point of the decision. That's the second one. Third one is pricing, right? Which is 2 things. One is all the delivery fee stuff, but also on the actual pricing of the products. The intention is not to be the cheapest possible player. There are other companies that are focusing on that, but at the same time, a customer can never feel like this is a premium service. I'm paying extra. I'm getting ripped off. You know what I mean? That can never be the case. And then fourth, final thing is on quality, right? Again, something that people either take for granted or generally forget about. But for us, fruits and vegetables is the biggest category, right? And quality, especially in that category, is a very important factor, because it's a tough category to build trust in, very easy category to lose trust in, and so you really have to nail quality there. But more generally, quality also means things like how many times do you end up going to customer support, right? Like when you order 10 things, do you get those 10 things, not the wrong item, not a missing item, right? Is it expired? Is it the packet torn? Whatever, right? How do you nail that? And so these are the 4 things, right? You have to be consistently strong and winning on all 4 of these things at the same time, right? That is what sort of entrenches you from the competition, right? And so those are the 4 axes actually that matter. And yeah, so ultimately, who ends up becoming the Amazon, Flipkart of the space and the Snapdeal or Shop-to-doorstep of the space, right, will be determined by who is best executing. Like for us, what does execution mean? Execution means doing these 4 things better than anybody else, right? And so that's the focus. That's what we're sort of focused on.
Great. So on behalf, sorry, I'll have to cut the question. We're running out of time. So, but on behalf of Masters Union, I want to thank you, Kaivalya, for this deeply enriching conversation. I think we spoke about how you started with your childhood friend and, did multiple entrepreneurial stints, and then to Zepto, where you don't see it anymore as a grocery delivery app, but rather like a quick commerce where, what you deliver is just secondary, but it's the system and the structure that you've built. And it can be beautifully scaled to whatever else the customer wants. So thank you for sharing your journey, and thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, guys.